Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who also would murder their doppelgangers on sight. Each month we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading horror novels.
Yippee-ki-yay, Zach. Right now we're reading the Southern Reach Tetralogy, Annihilation, Authority, Acceptance, and Absolution by Jeff VanderMeer.
And this time it is Acceptance. I'm Zach, and this week I am really interested in just prequel material in general, what it does for a larger narrative, why we need it, do we want it?
Okay, all right. Do we want it? I'm Bob. I'm interested in light. I'm really interested in light. I want to throw a quote out there, and I want to think about it as we do this. Leonard Cohen, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Zach, I'm on a sinking ship. I'm on a dying hill. I'm on a lot of cough medicine. I think this is the best Jeff VanderMeer book. I think it's the best weird fiction book of all time.
Wow. Okay. Well, Bob, I came here to tell you that I think this was easily the weakest of them all. So looks like we got a lot to talk about. All right. So what did you love about it, Bob?
Everything. I think it's great. In book 2, we started thinking about compost and Whitby, my favorite character. I've become Whitby. He talks a lot about terroir. It's this whole theory of terror. And people keep saying, do you mean terror? I said, no, terroir. Now, his idea is that the land influences the grape, not just the land, but also the culture around it, everything about that little climate of dirt. And I think this book is set up like a terroir or like compost. Again, we have 3 main perspectives, and they are all intersecting. They are all piling over each other. It's a layering process that feels like it makes no sense at all, and it feels like it's all arbitrary detail. However, I think it is the best book. There are the most reveals in a way that are interesting, not just handing us information, but inviting us in and making us participate in ways we have not participated. We're almost as equals to the author in this book, and we are not in book 1 or book 2.
Yes. Okay. I'm willing to humor the idea that this is a terroiristic, or even a terroirific book.
I like that one.
But and it does that by what we talked about with compost in the last one, about how it's no longer just singular objects, but it's things blended together to like you said just now, spill out one over the other and kind of intertwine amongst each other, so that emotional arcs that begin in one narrative can find their resolution in another. I guess that part of what I'm so frustrated with this book about is these disclosures and these revelations that you mentioned. I think that there are good revelations in this book, and there are bad revelations in this book. And by good, I mean things that increase a feeling of wonder and emotional depth and intrigue in me. And then revelations that make me go, I don't need that. I don't want that. So, real quick, just the first one, the owl. They find the diary of the biologist, and she gets to the island, and there's the owl there waiting for her, and she's almost certain it's the husband. And it flies away, and it brings back things. It drops twigs. It drops rabbits for her to eat. It's a very beautiful relationship. And then finally the owl grows old and died. And then the clincher is at the end. She spent 30 years with that owl. And she says, I'm not going to take a sample because I don't need confirmation of what I already know. That is a great revelation. It allows the reader to ponder it and weigh it and work with it. Now, a bad revelation in my mind is this crap we get about like she saw or felt deep within some kind of comets raining down on a foreign faraway planet and destroying an alien species and their technology being broken up and drifting through space until the shards lodge in different planets and one shard lodging into Earth. I don't need that. I don't need that. Why does she know that? I don't want that.
I think there are no bad revelations in this. I think they're all terroirific, Zach. Oh, yes. I think so. I think light is so important, and I think the lighthouse is so important. And I think that the tower is just an inverted lighthouse. What is at the top of a lighthouse? A big light bulb. What is at the bottom of the tunnel? A big light that you go through. I think that this book is set up like a prism, or if you think of like a kaleidoscope and you're looking through one of those great kaleidoscope. Why am I doing it through my nose? Sorry, through two at one eye. Going, I'm on a lot of cough medicine, Zach. So you keep turning it and it changes, or like a prism, which is refracting the light and changing the color and shooting it off in different directions. Each time the character gives us a revelation, we're not so sure it's true. We're not so sure it's the right one. Similarly, she's having these visions of maybe these terrible, like it's an outer space thing happening, real cosmology, terror. But then when we have Saul having similar visions, and that's why I think it's very much like a prism, because everyone's vision is echoed by another character, or all of their experiences keep being echoed. And VanderMeer is doing that intentionally because he mimics his own language a few different times. For example, when Saul gets pricked by the thing that infects him, it's described almost exactly as the way when the psychologist goes down to meet the crawler for the first time, and she's reaching down to pick up something full of light. But I think that this refracting light, character to character to character, is similar to an authority when we kept circumambulating around Area X, and we weren't really getting a closer look inside of it, but we were getting at least more information about it, coming around it, making it more three-dimensional. And I think when Saul has the visions of things raining down, it's from the Bible. It's not just like a space opera. It's almost exactly something from Isaiah or from Isaiah. But it's his perspective as a preacher. So every character, when you shine this light through them, it comes out a different way, and we have to look at it differently. We have to think about it slightly differently.
Well, that's a really good reading of that. I think that this book has definitely shown a willingness to use the voices of the people, or rather use the voices of the characters in the writing. And by that, I mean like the nature descriptions that come when the biologist is holding the pen are radically different than when Control is holding the pen, for example. The kind of observations that characters make, etc. So it makes perfect sense and is stylistically consistent for Saul's character to really think in biblical archetypes. That's a great observation.
I think the book is full of stuff like this, and I'm thinking it's the best one of the series.
What I guess what I want to pull apart is this the best book of the series? Or is this series taken as a whole a stunning success? I'm willing to grant the latter, that the whole thing is a success, but for me, I have big questions about this one just as a standalone work.
I think it's the crowning jewel of an outstanding achievement. I think this is the best one. I think the first one, I'm not very surprised until the end, and then I was kind of seeing it coming anyway. We're going to lead up to a horror. It's still great, but I think this one, there are so many weird things, and none of them I exactly understand, and I like that. And there are weird reasons for these things happening, and all of it is never certain. Even when we get this idea of Saul being pricked by light, this experiment that Henry and Suzanne, right? The twins, who are the Seance and Science Brigade, or as he calls them, the Light Brigade. So they cause an accident through their weird experiments, and he gets pricked in the thumb, and that's how all of this happens. He turns into basically the crawler, but it's the turning into the crawler is extremely horrific. Lots of people die. He has all of the visions that we've talked about. Everything goes dark, and then Area X basically just expands from him. So there are tons of reasons for it being this event, sparking everything. However, Saul has had visions before, looking out in the water and being in the lighthouse and potentially seeing like some sort of light hitting the water. But he has seen something like a megalodon or something gigantic in the water, and it resembles what the biologist becomes when she becomes that weird, almost sentient cloud thing. He sees that happen in the water because it disperses just like the cloud does into tadpoles. and he thinks, wow, that sure is a strange thing. And he's telling people, well, at least VanderMeer hints that he might be telling it to people at the bar as the lighthouse keeper. So even that kind of puts holes in this idea of Henry and Suzanne starting it. And then there are already holes in the idea of it being a space event. There's just no way to really know what's going on. And I think it's so much more fun to play in this because it is like we've become the vintners in the terroir, because now we have all of the tools ourselves and we can construct our own meaning. Whereas the first one is more entertaining by far, it's easier, and we get to a more rewarding end that seems to make sense. This one doesn't make any sense at all, and it's just light bursting everywhere.
So if I had to frame this in terms of genre, it sounds like, tell me if you disagree with this, but we can maybe think of the first one as kind of like a adventure novel crossed with a kind of like weird fiction lens, if that makes sense. Second one, I think we definitely described as almost kind of espionage novel, one that, but inside of a singular office workplace, but with all of the intrigue and kind of revelation and the information as currency that you would find in like a Le Carré novel, for example. This one, if I'm reading you correctly, or if I'm listening to you correctly, it sounds like you feel like this one has a lot more like experimental techniques folded into it. It's a lot more nuanced and complex in the way that not only it layers different storylines, but also plot lines, events. It echoes itself. It rhymes with itself. And then it kind of folds in with itself with the inclusion of entire chapters that are just contained within books, journals, and diaries within it.
Right. So we're actually experiencing what the characters have been experiencing all along now. We're experiencing it more firsthand. It's like an archaeological dig. It's more like a game. It is more experimental, I think. And I think for me, that makes it even more rewarding than book one or book two. They are slightly more passive. This one, it really takes work to get in there and get dirty and do the dig.
I guess that so I agree with you fully on this regard. The thing that bothers me was the narrative of it. And I, just the other day, I was thinking to myself, God, like in relation to the idea of spoiling things, I was thinking to myself, I think narrative is probably the aspect of these books. Like of all of our books we read, the narrative is the thing we probably talk about the least. It's all about what else is going on in the text. But this book made me realize that actually psychologically, I think like even if the narrative isn't the most important, I do need to feel like the characters are doing something and going somewhere towards a certain thing for me to feel kind of just like for events that happen in the plot to have meaning that my brain can put together, if that makes sense. And with this one, we had many elements that are prequel, and then we had many elements that were sequel. Those prequel elements, in my mind, didn't necessarily serve to further along the larger series-wide plot. They serve to kind of fill in the blanks and kind of color in, shade in these characters a little bit more. And then the sequel elements, they were kind of wandering around Area X, but even the characters themselves didn't seem to know why they were wandering around Area X. It was just because that was the only place to go. So as a reader, I was like, well, what are we doing, guys? What's going to happen?
I think it's the most moving. I know that the narrative is strange because we have, three main narratives. One is moving forward because it's Ghostbird and Control going forward, and we're kind of in real time with them. The other two are all past and probably through notes. They're through letters and notes, diary entries. And that's with the psychologist finding out exactly how involved she really was with Area X and what happened to her. And the other one is, of course, Saul talking about his little family. Saul, Charlie, and Gloria, not exactly a family, but kind of a makeshift family. And I think that their relationship is very touching. I think what else is also touching is the relationship between, as we see the psychologist as an adult, thinking back on Saul. And when she gives the letter to him at the she doesn't give it, she can't give it to him, but we get to read the letter and we get to see how much pain it's caused her to know that Saul has been down there suffering all of this time when he only had the impulse to save everyone. Because, that's why we have the inverted lighthouse. He ran away he didn't want anyone to get hurt. He sent everyone away from him, and then his body, his soul, everything just plummeted into the ground and created that tower, that tunnel. And forever since then, he's almost been expanding the border to keep everyone out, to keep everyone safe. And it's sad and it's moving to think about Gloria, changes her name to Cynthia, and we know her as a psychologist, but to have her trying to get involved in Area X, trying to send people back in there, trying to get a reaction so she can have that connection with Saul again, to believe that there's still humanity there and that so many people have died and been affected by that. We know it's been a bad project and it shouldn't have been happening at all, but now we can see the emotion behind it. And I think that's also, it shows the most rewarding, I guess, relationships out of any of the books, I think.
Not only that, but the relationship between Gloria, the psychologist director, and Whitby, who, post their excursion into Area X, their first excursion for Whitby, his only excursion, even though it's not explicit about it, she does seem to take on this kind of mothering role to him. Like she is protective of him, and is taking, I don't want to say notes, but she notices his trauma and his slow process of healing. And even though she herself reads the very, very interesting scene, the very tender scene, I think, where he's washing the mouse in the water, she describes her own tone as patronizing, but I do think that there is an element of care in that because, what she says is if anyone else saw this, they would immediately report it and he would get taken away on a psych evaluation. She's not interested in doing that. She's trying to talk him through it and be there for him.
It's really, necessary, the psych evaluation, when he kills his own doppelganger cold-bloodedly without making noise on top of the pile of journals, and she doesn't really know what to do. I think that's an interesting element too, because we don't even know which Whitby came back,
Yeah. I was thinking about that, but there is that the one detail he says is that the Whitby that was getting like choked and murdered had emotionless eyes, something like that, while the other one was filled with rage. I was like, okay, I think that's VanderMeer's way of signaling to us that the right one came back, but we don't know. We don't know.
We don't know because Ghostbird has turned out to almost have more emotions than the biologist.
Yeah. And, I think that there's unresolved questions about Lowry too.
Yeah, for sure. Is he a megalodon?
Is he well, yeah.
Is that the doppelganger? Yeah.
When he went in the water, was it megalodon or was it a shark? When he
they
first
call it
gets
both,
dumped
but it's a megalodon-like creature.
Oh, okay. I don't even know what the hell a megalodon is.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. That's why I've never seen one, probably. So,
yep, that would be a very good reason. Yes.
Yep. But every time a character goes in Area X and looks at an animal and immediately recognizes it as so-and-so person, you know what I mean? We kind of get the feeling that they're actually recognizing that it is that person. She looks at the moaning creature of the swamp that we were first introduced to in the first book and then is revealed finally visually in this third book. And we know that it's the psychiatrist or the psychologist from the, one of those double digits of expeditions. We know this, but I think that is totally unresolved in the case of Lowry. And I think that there's a lot of unresolved plot threads that were introduced here that I would love to see resolved in the fourth book, including the cell phone deal,
right?
And Lowry the megalodon. If that's the case, then who is this Lowry that is out helming Central?
Yeah, the first potentially successful doppelganger living out his life on whiskey and gold-tipped shoes. That was a strange detail. What do you think? So speaking of people being replaced, Whitby, I started to notice that I really like Whitby's theories the most. I think they're actually probably the most correct. but they just sound batshit crazy. But I think they're all the most correct. But he has this theory about people being... Control keeps reading to us because he has all of Whitby's documents that don't get drowned when they're in the water. And at one point he's reading where Whitby says that perhaps this is nature's way of just slowly disappearing us so the animals won't even notice that we go anywhere. What do you think about that? Back to the idea of Area X and what its influence is and what it's trying to do. Maybe it's this emotional thing of Saul reacting. What about it being the alien species or just a new ecology that wants to destroy humans quietly, carefully, and very silently? That's that's the same meaning as quietly. Oh no, throwing the ball to you, Zach.
Well, I think that this kind of goes back to why I was so unsatisfied with the alien, like ancient alien tech explanation of this. Well, it seems to me that seemed to be like the final answer, right? Like that seemed to be like the author giving us, this is what it was, broken piece of technology, an artifact that is now doing a function is totally unrelated to what is happening right now in Area X. And it in fact, is a broken machine. It's not even doing supposedly what it should be. And I think that Whitby's theories are fascinating and they're interesting. And most of all, they incite terror and a sense of sublimity in me. All elements that Jeff and Ann VanderMeer in their introductory essay of the Weird anthology identify as key things that make a text weird. This alien tech thing, while it is a great plot point, while it is like a cool thing that gets you thinking about what are the effects, how will our human technology be viewed on ecosystems a billion years from now? You know what I mean? Like, while it gets you thinking, I worry that a final explanation like that actually prevents you from thinking or feeling or wondering in the way that the multiplicity of explanations given to us previously allowed us to.
I still don't think it's I don't think it's the final explanation. I think it's just another theory, even though it seems like it's the final explanation. It seems like the authorial voice, but I think it's still character. I think it's still the light switching and switching and switching. And I think that we might look at that because Whitby has another theory about light being inside of different things or certain organisms already existing in things and we just didn't know that they were there, and suddenly they rear their head out and they come out. Because when they set the bulb up the first time in the lighthouse, it seemed to be some kind of strange object. So maybe that's the machinery. Maybe the aliens put it inside of a lighthouse bulb. But the boat runs aground. They have really terrible storm. Oh, it's not a bad storm, but the boat runs aground. It's a disaster. Then they put the light in there. Once the light brigade gets there, they put a little tiny hole in it. And it's like something escapes from that light. But Whitby has this idea of, let's see, what else does he describe it as? Let's see if I can find his little quote here. But it started making me think, did you know that we have had natural fission on Earth? Not in a power plant? Fission that just naturally occurred.
Deep inside the Earth? Is that the Earth's core? What do you...
No. 1.7 billion years ago in Oklo and Gabon, there is uranium there, and it just started happening. Fission just started happening, and it happened for about a few 100,000 years. It just started going. So there are just crazy things that can happen on very small scales or large scales like that are quite surprising. And I think that's what Whitby is looking at, this idea of something waking up inside of something else and then spreading and infecting things around it. So I don't know if we necessarily can say for sure that it's an alien machine. I think it could also be slightly still, could it be? But this idea of something already inside the material that now has been triggered.
Yes, to what you're saying. And also, I think that part of my lack of satisfaction with the alien tech answer was that it left behind one of the elements of this that I found so fascinating, which was the idea of Area X peering out at people. Another one of Whitby's ideas and theories was about that plant that wouldn't die, which was a great moment, great detail. But this idea that somehow behind these molecules, the appearance of a plant that's not actually a plant could be something peering out and observing you from where the molecules and cells of the plant are merely a illusion or a facade from which it hides behind. Immediate chills. Immediately looked up at my houseplant and was like, "Ooh, feel so seen."
Last week fruit, this time plants. Yeah. I found Whitby's. I want to read part of this because I think it's so interesting and it reflects what you were just saying. It says, Whitby had this idea about how quantum mechanics impacts photosynthesis, how an antenna receiving light and antenna can be hacked, about how one organism might peer out from another organism but not live there. I thought that was quite interesting, what he's saying.
Yeah.
And it would be an irreparable shock to the system, he says. That's that weird, classic weird.
These moments of peering, they don't just happen from houseplants, but also like the way that all of the animals in Area X seem to be, quote, weary or wary, weary. However you pronounce that W-A-R-Y word.
That's wary.
Wary, okay. Wary of those who travel through Area X. They seem to be aware. They seem to be watching and noticing them. But one of my favorite moments was when they find a corpse. And there's this moment of like, oh my God, is this how I'm going to end up? And Ghostbird, I believe, says something like, that's how we all end up, John. Da, da, da. And he looks down and he gets this sensation that even the corpse was looking at him through dead eyes. Like this idea that even when the body itself is decomposing, it's inside of Area X, it's still watching you. Chills. Chills down my spine.
Chills down my spine. Yar. Terroir. I think it's important too with the big monster. The eyes. Eyes are very important. The passageway into the soul, the thing that takes in light, its own little prism. I think eyes keep appearing on the really large organisms, including the biologist, which is, again, I said it was like a sentient cloud. It's very strange. It's like a giant cell flying through the air that just appears, disappears, appears, and can even go into water. It seems to have no limit, and it will disintegrate and become all of these little creatures and then show up again later. But it makes eye contact with all of its eyes down at Ghostbird because it's attracted to Ghostbird because it's the biologist. So even then, this thing that seems almost like it doesn't really listen to what we know of the laws of space. It just is here and there, but it is recognizing her and making that eye contact. And it's almost like eye contact between two different dimensions. And in that eye contact between two different dimensions, that creepy little light, looking out from your plant, give me some water, Zach. I think it's also a matter of like their old histories connecting. Because it's an obsession. At least it bothers Ghostbird that all of her memories are not really hers because she didn't really live them because she's just a doppelganger. But this connection between people through time, through dimensions, is happening, and it's represented through eyes here. So it's not just physics. It's not just a weird ecology. It's also between people. And I really liked giant monster flying over, recognition, and then leaving.
Yeah, and this monster itself really reminded me of the creature in H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountain of Madness, specifically because it shares the quality of being indescribable and filled with hundreds and hundreds of eyes. But one thing that I would say separates this from Lovecraft is this idea of meaning and connection that you're touching upon, which is like, it is also a indescribable monster, and yet its lack of describability is inscribed with the meaning of the person that transformed into it. Like,
right.
It gives us the idea that these transformations that are happening aren't exactly random. What does she become? She becomes that which she was most familiar with. She becomes terroir with eyes. Part of her body is a tide pool. Yeah. It talks about how part of her body has, like a tide pool with like starfish, for starfish to cling to rocks and things like that. Places where she herself used to hang out and dwell, places that are meaningful for her. In a sense, it's deeply Lovecraftian, but in another sense, it's so humanistic that it is, a large step beyond Lovecraft.
I think that's very interesting to have a monster that is completely like one of the characters we're already familiar with. It's almost like her psyche unleashed of its consciousness. There's no longer her directed. She's not behind the steering wheel, it seems like, but something much larger than her is now behind the steering wheel. And I think it's fun to look at this book in that way, because as we've already mentioned, there are different theories you can see through the eyes of different characters and try and pick apart these different theories to make your own interpretation of Area X. But it gets even more interesting in this book because it also introduces Christianity in a very hard way, because Saul is a preacher. And earlier I was saying that his visions are much like, I said Isaiah earlier, I meant to say Revelation. So parts of Isaiah and most of Revelation, they're almost exactly the same. But then we can also see he starts to think that Henry and Suzanne are demonic. And it's almost like Henry is the devil. So we could also look at this, if you wanted to look at it through that lens, you can start seeing all of these causes to be biblical. If you want to look at through the through a glass darkly lens, it's a classic horror story of two worshipers of the devil coming and doing weird experiments, and then, oh no, everything is unleashed. Because he keeps comparing them to light bringers. They're Luciferian characters, and then they do bring the light, and that light does have, for Saul's interpretation of it and the way that he narrates it to us, all biblical disasters. It's meteors falling from the sky, it's a light, it's a star falling down to the earth. It's really fun to be invited again, I think, in this much more, hey, I've written this crazy thing. You can take any lens you want, any lens I've provided you with, and try and do your best to put the pieces together. But each character is going to have, again, their own lens.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't frogs raining from the sky one of the 10 plagues of Egypt?
Oh, yes. Oh, the tadpoles.
We got little things swimming around in this text, I guess you could say.
Oh, yes.
The Seance and Science Brigade, I thought,
populated.
was one of the most fun aspects of this book.
For sure.
I loved the idea of this kind of paranormal investigative unit that was secretly controlled by the in-world equivalent of like the CIA, just in case they happen to find something, as kind of like a, just fund it just in case they happen to find something. But if they don't, it's easy to just write them off. But also playing with the idea of like, what is the role of the kooky conspiracy nut, the Fox Mulder type, in a book where the paranormal actually exists, if that makes sense. like usually the books either have the kooky conspiracy type that is out searching for the truth, but it's never confirmed, or they have the paranormal. Rarely do we get a chance to see what happens to the conspiracy nut when they actually find the paranormal. It's like what if a dog were to actually catch its own tail,
What do I do? Yes, I think they're very interesting, especially Henry with the constant crick at his neck like this, staring forward at you. But there's a doppelganger for him too. So yes, they've found it, but it seems like they've already been deep in this the whole time, or maybe they are even deeper than whatever operation is putting them to this. They might be using the CIA or the equivalent as well. They seem to know a lot more than they're letting on, and all of it seems completely kooky. They're just bringing this weird equipment, setting it up, but they break something. And they do it deliberately, and they know what they're looking for. Because when Saul is bending down, Henry gets really close. And the way VanderMeer describes it is he says he's looking at the grass like someone who just lost their ring or their money. He's so obsessed with trying to find out this light that he's created. He's like one of the little evil characters from Lord of the Rings, trying to get Sauron to come back trying anything to make him appear. Oh, where's my little light leaf?
I guess I did like the idea of a paranormal object being embedded within a very everyday kind of object, and it's basically up to these ghost hunters, because the idea is that there have been unusual and strange things happening for potentially centuries, as long as that area has been inhabited, it's been known to feature some kind of something going on. So, the classic image of a ghost hunter who shows up with radio wave detectors and, infrared vision goggles, that kind of thing. And they go around and they actually do find something embedded within a very everyday object. It's really almost playing in this tradition of kind of like the haunted lighthouse. You know what I mean? Like,
For sure.
It's, I guess, going back to what we said about authority and annihilation, but you do get the sense that VanderMeer is really folding in everything he's ever loved about weird fiction or horror, horror books or anything like that, folding it into one kind of quilt of a tale where there's room for everybody.
It reminds me, last week you mentioned Edgar Allan Poe's unfinished story, The Lighthouse, that he never got to, I think he only wrote the first maybe 300 words and then passed away. But it makes me think of that, all of the potential that was there. This is the lighthouse story, but now it's as if the terror can finally come out that never got to come out of that story. And now it just populates this area and torments these poor people. But it brought the megalodon back. So that's a win.
Well, when Saul went up to the roof of the lighthouse and found all of them in there, fiddling around in the tower of the lighthouse, and he's holding the axe, and he's like, "What are you all doing here?" It reminded me of that scene.
Yeah.
In that moment, I thought of that scene in The Lighthouse, the Robert Pattinson film, where he
Spilled the
peers in.
Oh, yeah.
And he peers in, and Willem Dafoe has the lighthouse light just shining in. He's just staring in. It's just utterly insane. Yeah.
100%.
Well, we got one more book, the unexpected finale of this series. Maybe finale. Who knows? Things could change. He might come back and surprise us all with another one. But I am looking forward to seeing how. Yeah, arbitrage. I am looking forward to seeing how it wraps up, and supposedly it has more to do with Lowry and the Science and Science Brigade. So, we'll see where this goes. Talk to you later,
I think
Bob.
you can't top this one. Talk to you later, Zach.